So the Pima Air and Space Museum opened its doors back in 1976. Today we cover more than 80 acres. We have more than 450 aircraft on display. We're getting more of them all the time. Today I'm going to highlight for you some of our unique and historic military, civilian, commercial, and search and rescue aircraft that we have here in our collection. And we're going to go ahead and start right here. So on both sides of the tram and up a little ways, we have most of our museum's collection of U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps jets. Now many of these are carrier-based planes that perform the same jobs as their land-based counterparts, but also have to incorporate strengthened structures to withstand the forces of being catapulted off carrier decks and yanked to a stop when landing on the ships. Taking off and landing on ships is one of the most difficult jobs. Only 500 feet long, and there's only 4 cables stretched across it to catch and hook the bottom of the plane. Add in the fact that the runway is moving all the time. Studies have shown that landing on an aircraft carrier is more stressful for a pilot than actually being shot at in combat. And Tom Cruise made it look so easy. Speaking of Maverick in his most recent movie, on the left side of the tram, I want to point out the McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet. The Hornet is the plane over on the left side of the tram in the Blue Angels colors of blue and gold. The Hornet is currently one of the fighters used by both the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps. They've been in service since the early 1980s, and advanced versions of them are expected to remain in use for the foreseeable future. This particular one actually flew with the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels aerobatic team for several years before it was retired in 2013. All right, also on the left side of the tram, I want to point out the EA-6B Prowler. This is the gray aircraft that has the long tube coming out of its nose. This is an electronic warfare aircraft that was designed to jam, destroy, or confuse enemy radars. This particular Prowler has a unique and local history. In the late 1990s, the Marines needed more Prowlers. One of the ways they got them was to refurbish old aircraft and put them back into service. For this particular plane, 3 Prowlers were removed from storage over across the street here at the Air Force Base, and their parts were combined into this one aircraft. This plane went into service in 2004, and because of the way it was built from the parts of several aircraft, it got the nickname Frankenprowler. The 2-seat trainer version of Great Britain's very first jet fighter, the Gloucester Meteor, is over here on the right side of the tram. The Meteor is the plane over on the right side in the brown and dark blue camouflage. Meteors were the only Allied jet to see combat during World War II. The 2-seat trainer like this one was introduced after World War II in 1948, and over 700 of these trainers ended up being built for Great Britain and 7 other foreign militaries. This particular one was restored using the nose of a night fighter because the original trainer nose was missing when our museum acquired the plane. Now as we roll along here on the right side of the tram, we have more of our museum's collection of military trainers. Military trainers generally have 2 seats, one for the instructor and one for the student. Prospective pilots are first instructed in the basics of the science of flight, like how to take off, land, and control the plane in the air. This training is often conducted in small propeller-driven aircraft. Once the basics are mastered, pilots move up to more sophisticated, faster, and often jet-powered aircraft. At this stage, they begin to learn the basics of high-speed flight and aerial combat. It's not until the pilot starts to train in the actual plane they'll be flying when they learn combat techniques and how to employ the weapon system.
That was a
While
707.
many trainers are specifically designed for that role,
I didn't know.
That's a 707. We all know it's a 707.
Good thing I took a picture of it. I think. Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah, I did too.
There's Air Force One.
Yeah.
The Supercat Jaguar is the pink
DC-9.
plane over here on the right side of the tram. It was originally intended as a 2-seat supersonic jet trainer and light attack aircraft. In the end, though, the Jaguar was designed as a single-seat interceptor with nuclear capability. They entered service with the French Air Force and the British Royal Air Force in the early 1970s. This particular one actually flew with the British Royal Air Force during the first Gulf War. The unique color of this plane is known as desert pink, and the color provided effective camouflage in the desert sands of the Middle East.
That.
Now, as we start to turn the corner here, if you look out to the right side of the tram, you'll see an enormous aircraft over there. That's a B-36 Peacemaker, and we're going to talk about it later in the tour, but this gives you a great vantage point on just how big that plane really is.
Look at the propeller.
The yellow and black plane on the right side of the tram is a Fokker C-31 troop ship. This is the militarized version of the F-27 Friendship airliner that was designed in the Netherlands. This is one of two that were delivered to the United States Army to be used by the U.S. Army's Golden Knights parachute demonstration team, and it was in use with that team from 1985 until 2018. Members of the Golden Knights perform at air shows and competitions around the world, as well as take celebrities and heads of state on tandem jumps, including former President George H.W. Bush in 2004. All right, the next collection of aircraft we're going to look at are going to be on the right side of the tram, and this is our collection of VIP transports. These aircraft have been used to provide transportation to high-ranking military officers and government officials. They're generally commercial airliners that have been fitted with modified executive seating. The first VIP transport I want to highlight for you is right here on the right side. This is a Lockheed VC-121 Constellation. This particular plane was used by General Dwight Eisenhower when he was commander of Allied forces in Europe after World War II. He named it Columbine after the state flower of Colorado, and you can see the flower represented on the nose of the plane. The green VH-34 Choctaw helicopter on the right side of the tram is an Army VIP helicopter. This particular helicopter carried Presidents Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson between 1960 and 1964. Beginning in 1964, all presidential helicopter operations were transferred to the U.S. Marine Corps instead of the Army. That's why it's called Marine One today. Choctaws remained in use as cargo and transport helicopters until their retirement from military service in 1974. Okay, hang on everybody, we got a bump coming up here. That's not it, this is it right here. Alright, the next two VIP transports I'm going to highlight here are going to be on the right side of the tram. And both of these have used the call sign Air Force One, meaning they have both been used to carry United States presidents. The first one I want to highlight for you is right here on the right side of the tram. This is the military adaptation of the Boeing 707 airliner, which the Air Force called a VC-137. This plane was introduced to the presidential aircraft fleet back in 1959 and is the second of 5 VC-137s to serve the executive branch. During most of this plane's service life, it was used to carry large groups of VIPs, but it did carry President Kennedy on at least one occasion. This plane's real claim to fame, though, is that back in 1981, this plane was used to bring the 52 American hostages held at the embassy in Iran back to the United States after their release. On this occasion, the aircraft used the call sign Freedom One. This call sign was used again 10 years later, in 1991, when the plane was used to bring American prisoners of war back from Iraq at the end of the Gulf War. And just before its retirement, this plane also served as Air Force Two, carrying Vice President Al Gore.
Al Gore got the old hand-me-downs.
All right, the next Air Force One is over here on the right side of the tram, and this is a Douglas VC-118 Liftmaster. This plane is based on the Douglas DC-6 airliner. It's the last propeller-driven aircraft to be assigned as the primary aircraft of the President of the United States. This plane served both Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. While both presidents preferred to fly on the larger, faster, jet-powered VC-137s like we just saw, this aircraft was kept because many airports at the time were just too small for the big jets. So the smaller plane remained important to the Air Force One fleet.
Yep.
All right, now as we roll along here, if you look to the left side of the tram, this giant seaplane over here, that's a Martin Mars that's called the Philippine Mars.
Philippines.
We're going to talk about it later in the
Philippines.
tour, but that's one of our most recent additions to our collection. This gives you an up-close and personal look at this giant airplane.
Oh, wow.
Also over here on the left side of the tram, you'll see a building coming up. Inside that building is a fully restored B-17 Flying Fortress bomber and a lot of really interesting historic memorabilia from the
Bomber.
390th Bomb Group that actually flew B-17s in World War II. Now, while that
B-17
museum
bomber.
is not a part of our museum, admission to you is free, and I'd highly recommend going in there and checking out that beautiful plane and all that really interesting history that goes with it.
Which building?
That one right there.
Okay.
The admission
All right, the
is.
next collection aircraft we're going to look at are going to be on the left side of the tram. These are our Harriers. This is the most inclusive collection of the most significant variants of the vertical takeoff and landing jet fighter.
Oh, vertical.
Originally designed by Hawker
Yeah, like-
Aviation in the United
Yeah, like
States,
this.
So they can just take off like
Harrier was
this.
adopted by the British military and the U.S. Marine Corps in the 1970s. Four rotating nozzles under the wings direct the exhaust downward for vertical flight. The silver aircraft in the middle of the row is one of the experimental Kestrel prototypes. The other aircraft in this row, all of which were built in England, served in either the British Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, or with our U.S. Marine Corps.
Here.
All right, the next collection we're going to look at is some of our early supersonic jet fighters.
Wow.
The introduction of jet engines at the end of World War II brought the quest for ever faster speeds to the forefront of fighter plane development in the 1950s and the 1960s. The military at that time de-emphasized the maneuverability of the dogfight era and instead emphasized speed and long-range missiles for air-to-air combat. A couple of great examples of this design philosophy are the two light gray colored planes over on the right side of the tram. The F-102 Delta Dagger has the red tail markings, and the F-106 Delta Dart has the yellow markings on the tail. Both of these were designed as high-speed interceptors, which meant their job was to fly out at supersonic speeds to intercept enemy bombers before they could reach the coasts of the United States. The plane's triangular or delta-shaped wings are very efficient at high speeds but make it significantly less maneuverable than planes with other wing types. All right, now over on the left side of the tram, I want to talk about another supersonic fighter from the 1960s. I want to talk about the F-4 Phantom. The Phantom is the plane over on the left in the brown and green camouflage that has the little red star on the side. Originally designed as a high-speed interceptor for the U.S. Navy, the Phantom's design proved to be more adaptable than the F-102 or the F-106 that we just looked at. For this reason, the Air Force also adopted the Phantom, using it for both air-to-air combat and for bombing ground targets. While this large and fast plane was slower than the Soviet Union's fighters that were quicker turning than the Phantom, American pilots quickly overcame the Phantom's deficiencies with better training and superior tactics. This allowed it to become one of the most successful and widely used strike fighters ever. As we start to round the corner here, if you look to the right side of the tram at the silver aircraft that has the orange lightning bolt on the side, you'll see one of the United States' first jet fighters to go into production. This plane is called the P-80 Shooting Star. All major powers on both sides of World War II worked to develop jet-powered combat aircraft during the war. Germany was the first to fly a jet in 1939. By 1944, Germany, Great Britain, and the U.S. had all designed their first combat jets. While the British and the Germans both put jets into combat during World War II, the United States jets like the P-80 did not see combat until the 1950s during the Korean War, where they were largely used for air support of ground troops. Although the P-80 is also credited with participating in the first jet-to-jet dogfight. All right, a little museum orientation as we roll along here. Coming up on the left side of the tram is hangar number 3. In front of us is hangar 4. And to the left of hangar 4 is hangar 5. All three of those hangars have great displays of World War II and Korean War aircraft. In addition, beyond hangar 4 and 5 is another huge outdoor area that's full of aircraft displays you can go see. All right, now here's kind of a rare one for you. Over on the left side of the tram, you'll see a rather unusual looking plane that's missing a whole lot of parts. This is called the Bud RB-1 Conestoga, and it was built during World War II. The military at that time believed there'd be a shortage of aluminum available to build aircraft, so they sought designs for aircraft made from what they called non-strategic materials. Generally, this referred to wood, but the Bud company, who built railway cars, experimented with building aircraft out of spot-welded stainless steel, and there was early interest from the Army and the Navy. However, the expected aluminum shortage never developed, and only 17 of these Conestogas were ever built. The one we're looking at here actually started out life with the U.S. Navy, then it was used by some local freight companies, but was eventually abandoned for many years at the airport in Douglas, Arizona. It was donated to our museum in its current condition back in 1978, and we're still looking for the rest of the parts. Next group of aircraft I want to highlight for you are on the right side of the tram. These are light civil aircraft from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. All these planes were developed to provide personal transportation for individuals. Some of these planes were actually kits that pilots could build themselves in their own backyards. The military also used small transport aircraft like these for pilots who had been assigned to non-flying duties to help them keep up on their flight skills. All right, the yellow plane on the right side of the tram is a whole other category of aircraft we like to highlight on the tour. This is a Snow S2A crop duster. Aircraft such as this are vital to the agricultural industry. They're used to spray fertilizers and pesticides on crops and farmlands. The flying involved in aerial application or crop dusting is technically challenging, and it's occasionally hazardous. Pilots who fly these aircraft are highly trained in all aspects of aerial application, from safe pesticide use and entomology to near aerobatic flight skills. Okay, over on the left side of the tram, we have a collection of airliners from the 1940s and 50s. The plane I want to highlight for you is called the Vickers Viscount airliner. The Viscount is the plane on the left side of the tram that has the 4 propellers on it. The Vickers Viscount was the world's first turboprop airliner. It was designed and built by Vickers Armstrong of Great Britain and could hold between 40 and 63 passengers with a crew of 4. 445 of these Viscounts were built between 1948 and 1964, and the aircraft flew for over 60 years, with the last Viscount retiring in just 2008. The plane we're looking at here was actually the first turboprop airliner in all of North America. It flew from Toronto to New York City for Trans-Canada Airlines and had a service life that spanned from 1955 to 1991. All right, if you look to the right side of the tram at the plane with the yellow wings and the gray body, you'll see the Sikorsky S-43 Baby Clipper. This is an airliner from the 1930s, but it was also used by our U.S. Navy and Marine Corps. In the 1930s, many airliners were designed as seaplanes because airports were not common, but lakes, rivers, and oceans made useful substitutes. The Baby Clipper could hold 15 passengers with a crew of 3. This particular plane actually flew for Inter-Island Airways in Hawaii in the 1930s and 40s. It later flew in Alaska, where it was damaged in an accident in the 1950s, and spent the next 30 years at the bottom of a lake. It was recovered by a member of the U.S. Marine Corps, that's why it's painted like this, and it was restored and later loaned to our museum. And speaking of restoration, as we round the corner here, if you look to the left side of the tram, you can see a rather large hangar warehousey kind of building. That's where our
607.
museum's restoration team does their magic of turning these relics we acquire into the displays you get to see. So after
Lucky.
more airports were available and we saw the next generation of airliners take shape. One of the great examples of this era of airliner is the Lockheed Constellation, or Connie. The Connie is the silver plane over here on the right side of the tram that has the TWA, or Trans World Airlines, painted in red. It was one of the first long-range civilian airliners to go into service after the war and could carry between 44 and 81 passengers with a crew of 6. The aircraft we're looking at here is actually the 10th Connie that was ever built, and it's the oldest one still left in the world. It flew briefly with the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1946 and was then returned to Lockheed and resold to TWA, where it flew from 1947 to 1961. So as I mentioned, the Constellation was one of the first post-war airliners to go into service. If you look to the right side of the tram at the giant white airliner with the ANA on it, you'll see one of the most recent airliners to go into service. This is a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. This is the first jet airliner that's not constructed of aluminum. Instead, it's nearly 80% carbon fiber composites. This, along with new advances in engines and wing shape, make it one of the most fuel-efficient and cost-effective jet airliners ever built. The one you're looking at is only the second Dreamliner ever produced. It participated along with other prototypes in the aircraft testing and certification processes that lasted from 2009 till 2011. It carries the markings of All Nippon Airlines, or ANA, which was the first airline to buy the new plane, and it can hold 242 passengers with a crew of 8. All right, we're now going to move on from our collection of commercial airliners to talk about our collection of military cargo aircraft. Development of military cargo planes focuses on the size of the plane, as the military needs planes that can deliver large amounts of equipment, supplies, and troops. The first one of the military cargo aircraft I want to talk to you about is the one we mentioned a little earlier over on the right side of the tram, the Philippine Mars. Only 7 of these Martin Mars aircraft were produced, and they served primarily as cargo aircraft with the U.S. Navy from 1945 to 1956. It's designated as a flying boat, which means it can only land on the water and does not have any landing gear. The wheels you see on it are called its beaching gear and were only used to pull the plane out of the water for maintenance or for storage. After retiring from the Navy, the Philippine Mars went on to become a firefighter for a timber company up in Canada. It could hold 7,200 gallons of water. It stayed in as a water bomber until 2006, when it was retired from the timber company. In February of 25, so this past February, this plane took its final flight from Sprout Lake in Canada down here to Lake Pleasant in Arizona, where the plane was disassembled, trucked up here, and reassembled so you could see it as part of the museum.
There's a lot of wood. It's just recent. A lot of wood. Just recent. Philippine Mars.
The plane on the left side of the tram is a Douglas C-54 Skymaster. These cargo planes are based off of the DC-4 airline.
DC-4 brand.
The first Skymasters actually started out as commercial airliners, but were soon commandeered by the U.S. Army Air Forces in early 1942. Requests for the cargo version soon followed. C-54s are probably best known for participating in the Berlin airlift that took place between June of 1948 and September of 1949. In one of the largest humanitarian efforts ever, 2.3 million tons of food, medicine, fuel, and other supplies were delivered to West Berlin, mostly in C-54s. The C-54 you're looking at actually participated in the Berlin airlift between September of 48 and January of 49. The two identical cargo aircraft on the left side of the tram are the C-130 Hercules. This is one of the most popular cargo planes. These cargo planes have been in military and civilian use since the 1950s, and advanced versions of them are still in production today. The green one is an example of the first version of the plane. The gray one with the orange on the nose was specifically modified to deliver supplies to the research stations at the North and South Poles by using the large skis you see on the landing gear for taking off and landing in the snow. The small little aircraft between the two C-130s is a Vietnam-era reconnaissance drone called a Firebee. It's no accident the Firebee is displayed between the two C-130s, because when the Firebee was in service, it was launched from and controlled from C-130s.
C-130 Hercules.
Is that United Air Force?
Way much bigger.
Oh, true.
Oh my God.
So the military is not the only organization that needs to move large objects. NASA also has a need for very large cargo planes. If you look to the right side of the tram, you can see the Super Guppy, the very large white aircraft that has the inflated looking fuselage. It was built by combining parts from a Boeing 377 airliner and an Air Force C-97 for NASA in the 1960s. This one is the first Guppy out of 5 that were built. They were used to carry sections of rockets, the Apollo space capsules, moon landers, and even whole other airplanes. The last cargo this particular Guppy carried before it was retired was the Hubble Space Telescope. This Guppy was used by NASA till 1991, when it was retired in favor of new Guppies. And if you think it also kind of might look like a whale, the European version of that type of cargo aircraft is actually called the Beluga, and they're built up to look like a white whale.
DC-3. The DC-3? I'm pretty sure.
Look at this.
Look, NASA
The
707.
giant silver aircraft on the left side of the tram is a Douglas C-124 Globemaster II. This aircraft has a distinctive double-deck fuselage and clamshell doors here in the nose, which allowed it to have easy loading and unloading of cargo. It was primarily designed to transport large and heavy cargo, including vehicles, equipment, and supplies. It's one of the U.S.'s largest transport aircraft that were used during the 1950s and the 1960s.
Big one.
If you look to the left side of the tram at the plane with the red crosses on the tail and the wings, you'll see one of the types of plane that Guppy was built from. This is the C-97 Stratofreighter by Boeing. The Boeing C-97 was developed after a request by the U.S. Army Air Forces for a transport aircraft based on the B-29 bomber. It first flew in 1945 and proved to be a very successful and versatile aircraft. So much so that Boeing modified the design slightly to create their first post-war airliner, the Boeing 377. You'll remember that's the other plane the Guppy was built from. In 1969, the aircraft we're looking at here was actually loaned to the International Red Cross to fly relief supplies to Nigeria during the Civil War. That's why it has the red crosses on it. While airplanes are used in all different capacities of the military, one of the greatest restrictions on airplanes is how far they can fly before they need to land and refuel. Efforts to develop a way to refuel planes in the air began in the 1920s. However, it wasn't until the 1950s that a practical solution for aerial refuel was developed. If you look to the left side of the tram, you can see a couple examples of aerial refueling aircraft, such as the KB-50 Super Fortress. That's the polished silver aircraft over here on the left. The KB-50 is also pretty unique for our collection in that it is a tanker version of a B-50 bomber. The B-50 was actually an updated version of a B-29 bomber, and there's only 5 examples of a B-50 left in the world, and that's one of them.
Royal Air Force.
While being able to refuel in the air is important, the military also needs a way to detect approaching aircraft. Since World War II, the primary method of detecting approaching aircraft has been radar. Because radar only works in line of sight, the higher up the antenna is, the farther it can see. On the right side of the tram is an aircraft developed for Great Britain to carry radar antennas. You can see the large radome underneath the nose of the aircraft that houses the radar. This dark gray plane is called the Avro Shackleton. It's also unique because of the use of contra-rotating propellers, in which 2 propellers in line with each other turn in opposite directions. This makes the propellers more efficient and provides more power than one single propeller. And as we go by on the right side, you'll see another variant of the Lockheed Constellation. This one also has a giant radome underneath it.
On the right side.
Right there.
All right, now I'm going to switch you over to the left side of the tram. We're going to talk about some of our collection of long-range bombers. Long-range strategic bombing was developed during World War I as a way to attack military and industrial targets far away from the front lines of battle. The small and ineffective raids of World War I gave way to the huge air battles of World War II. The development of the atomic bomb at the end of World War II gave new importance to the development of even larger and longer-ranged bombers. The first of the post-war bombers to enter service with the U.S. Air Force is this giant aircraft over on the left side of the tram that we mentioned a little earlier. This is the B-36 Peacemaker. It's the largest bomber to ever serve in the U.S. Air Force and used 6 of the most powerful piston engines ever developed. The B-36 was the last propeller-driven aircraft used by the United States. It went into service in 1949, but it was already becoming obsolete, and its replacement flew only 3 years later in 1952. And as we roll by, we look at the B-36, you'll notice this version not only has 6 giant piston engines, it also has 4 jet engines on it. This was all in an effort to keep it relevant at the very beginning of the jet age. Even with all that though, by 1959, all the B-36s were out of service. All right, the next bomber I want to highlight views on the left side of the tram. This is a B-52 Stratofortress. This is actually a later version of the plane that was introduced in 1959 and served until 1994. This particular aircraft actually served in the 1991 Gulf War with Iraq and participated in what was at the time the longest combat mission ever flown in history. On the first night of the Gulf War in January 1991, this aircraft and several others flew from Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana non-stop to Iraq and back, launching cruise missiles at targets near Baghdad. In all, the planes were refueled 4 times in the air and flew for a total of 35 hours before landing. Alright, the next bomber I want to highlight for you is on the left side of the tram. This is actually another version of the B-52. This version began flying in 1956 and was the main version of the aircraft used in the Vietnam War. They were painted this way with black on the bottom and green camouflage on top, since most of their missions in the Vietnam were flown at night. The last B-52 left the assembly line in 1962. Today, 58 of them remain in active service and are expected to be used until 2050, giving them a potential active service life of nearly 100 years. Okay, over on the right side of the tram, we have a whole collection of foreign aircraft that were built outside the U.S. Aircraft over there were built in either China, Denmark, France, Germany, Great Britain, Poland, the Soviet Union, and Switzerland. They consist of trainers, fighters, and fighter bombers. The one I want to highlight for you is called the Alpha Jet. The Alpha Jet's over here on the right side of the tram in the West German Air Force markings, where the Alpha Jet was used as a close air support fighter bomber. The Alpha Jet was also used as a trainer in the French Air Force. The Alpha Jet represents the Europeans' answer to the expanding cost of developing military aircraft back during the 1970s. As such, it was developed as a joint venture between aircraft manufacturers in both France and West Germany. Most Western European military aircraft since then have also been developed as part of collaborations between two or more countries. This spreads the development costs amongst the various countries, and it ensures a greater number of aircraft sales during the process. Alright, next one I want to highlight for you is on the right side of the tram. This is the gray and green camouflage plane with the little blue circle on its nose. This is called an English Electric Lightning. This is the only Mach 2 European developed swept-wing fighter that was used by the Royal Air
You
Force.
said blue.
The Lightning entered service with the Royal Air Force in 1960, and it served as a bomber interceptor, which meant its job was to protect the United Kingdom from Soviet bombers. Versions of the Lightning remained in service until the late 1980s. The Lightning represented great advancements in performance and technology. Its power-to-weight ratio enabled the aircraft to stand on its tail and exceed the speed of sound going straight up.
Jesus Christ. That's pretty crazy. It is, and going straight up too.
Alright, the last bomber I want to highlight for you is on the left side of the tram. This is the sleek silver delta-winged aircraft. This plane is known as the B-58 Hustler. B-58's claim to fame is that it was the United States' first supersonic bomber. Only 116 of these were ever made, and the one you're looking at is the very last one to come off the assembly line in 1962. On the right side of the tram, we have a whole row of Soviet-designed jet fighters. The earliest and first in this row is a two-seat MiG-15 trainer dating from the 1950s. This is the one that has the 038 on its nose and the Polish markings. The latest and last in this row is a MiG-29 interceptor that was introduced in the late 1980s and is still being flown by some former Soviet republics. While all the aircraft in this row were designed in the Soviet Union, many of the examples we have here in our collection were actually built in either China or Poland.
That's the MiG here.
And that's the MiG-29 going by on the right that has the twin tails on it. Okay, now I'm going to switch you over to the left side of the tram.
No.
We're going to look at most of our museum's collection of helicopters. Initially developed in the 1930s, helicopters are designed to take off and land vertically, thus eliminating the need for large open areas. They have found extensive use in the military for carrying troops, cargo, and as armed gunships. Civilian operators have also found helicopters handy for many different jobs, including law enforcement, search and rescue, air ambulances, firefighting, tourism, and cargo shipments. Also on the left side of the tram, you'll see a green helicopter that has a red cross on its nose. This is the Bell UH-1 Huey, which is one of the most widely used and popular helicopters. The Huey was introduced by the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, and it became one of the symbols of America's involvement in that war. This particular one is marked as a medical evacuation aircraft responsible for taking wounded soldiers from the battlefield to hospitals. The use of these helicopters saved many lives.
Look at this, Ethan.
No, I'm looking at it.
What is that?
I don't know. It's like,
I think they're missing a few parts.
One of the largest heavy-lift helicopters developed in the United States Army is on the right side of the tram, and it's known as the Sky Crane. In the 1960s, The Army was looking for a heavy lift helicopter capable of carrying large objects, such as artillery pieces, small vehicles, and large amounts of other cargo. This helicopter is capable of carrying 27,000 pounds. Since the retirement from the military in the early 90s, the Sky Crane has seen extensive use in fighting forest fires and in the logging and construction industries. Okay, now I want to switch over to the left side of the tram. We'll talk about that gray and green camouflaged helicopter over there on the left. This is called a MiL-24 attack helicopter. This is a unique Soviet-designed helicopter that does not have a Western counterpart. It was an attempt to combine the firepower of a heavily armed and armored helicopter gunship with the troop-carrying capability of a helicopter like the Huey. While the troop-carrying capability proved to be of little use in combat, the MiL-24 has become one of the most successful attack helicopters ever built, and is still being used by Russia and 30 other countries. Now, next to the MiL-24, the dark green helicopter that says "Tired Dude" on its nose, this is a Sikorsky CH-37 Mojave. This helicopter served as a heavy lift helicopter for the U.S. Marine Corps. Also called the Deuce, the Mojave proved especially useful in transporting cargo and vehicles through its clamshell doors it has in the nose. Some of these were actually deployed to Vietnam. While their large size made them easy targets during air assault missions, the Mojaves proved useful in retrieving downed helicopters from combat zones. Despite their usefulness, though, only 55 of those Mojaves were ever built.
This one, I like this helicopter.
This one?
See that one? The one with scorpion.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Looks nice.
The orange and white helicopter on the left side of the tram might look like just another Huey, but this is actually called a twin Huey because they were upgraded to have two engines and a larger, longer cabin than the original Huey that we just saw. This helicopter started out life as a VIP transport for the U.S. Marine Corps. In May of 1987, it actually carried President Ronald Reagan during the G7 summit in Venice, Italy. In 1990, it was converted and it was assigned to the Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma, Arizona. Here it worked as a search and rescue helicopter until it was retired in 2020.
Oh, recent. Yeah.
Boeing also
Okay,
made a
folks, that
helicopter.
concludes our tour. I want to thank you for riding with us today. I also want to remind you we have a couple of other museums you might be interested in. The first one is the Titan Missile Museum that's about 30 miles from here down in Green Valley. That's the last remaining Titan missile silo, and through the tour you can actually go underground and see how the Air Force operated the facility. The other museum is our Military Vehicle Museum that's right here in the parking lot of this museum. That museum has military vehicles from World War I all the way to the present. I think you'll enjoy either one of them. So thanks again for riding with us today. Please enjoy the rest of your day here at the museum.
Yippee!